First of all, my name is Josh Harnagle, and I'm a CFI, II, and MEI, and I'm the VP of Marketing for Redbird. My role today is mostly as sort of moderator and host. I have with me Jeff Matheson, our Director of Customer Support, and he's the expert, and he's the one that's going to help us with these tips that we go through and kind of answer any questions you have. A lot about this webinar is going to be based on questions, so feel free to ask questions as they come up. You can type them into the GoToWebinar control panel on the right-hand side. I also have Joey Colleran, which some of you may know is our Director of Customer Success. She's on, and she'll be doing some of the admin work in the background, getting those questions answered. So with that, Jeff, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, tell everybody what you do.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jeff Matheson. I'm the Director of Customer Support. I've been with Redbird for over 10 years. I've installed probably a whole lot of your simulators, starting out with Unit 1. Now I'm running the support team as well as the installation team. So I manage about 4 guys that, all we're here for is you guys to answer your questions and help solve your problems, and do a lot of the testing that each of the unit requires before it goes out to our customers.
Yeah, an interesting note, Jeff was actually the person who hired me into Redbird and was my boss for a while before I moved into the sales and marketing function. So we go way back. So Jeff, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to chat today. Just as kind of a high level overview, just so you kind of know where we're going. We're going to talk about our team, kind of sim installation and setup, some of the sort of standard things that you have to do on the sim around updating and management, and then going through some of the known bugs, limitations, and we'll end with how we shut a sim down the proper way. Along the way, there'll be lots of times for your questions, and my guess is there's about 20 minutes of content here. So please ask questions, let us know what issues you have, and we can kind of help. I will say that if you have a question that's kind of narrow in focus and has a very technical answer, we may have you push that conversation offline. And let's start right now at the very beginning. The best, we're going to touch on this later, but the best way to kind of get service is support@redbirdflight.com or call us at 512-301-0718, or chat us on our website. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into our tech support team. So Jeff, go ahead and talk about your team and how to get a hold of them and all that.
Well, I think Josh alluded to how to get in touch with us. We're here Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 6 Central Standard Time. We also are available through chat, email, phone, but sometimes I do check emails, and some of our guys check emails on the weekend. So if it's something that you're needing help with, we're not going to pick up the phone on the weekend, but feel free to shoot an email, and sometimes someone will see that and get back to you. Our tech support team here consists of myself, and then we have 4 support technicians. We have Rick Memon. He's been with the company for 10 years. He knows just about everything with all the iterations of software, different versions of everything. So he's kind of our go-to guy for the hard technical questions. We have John Ochterlony. We refer to him as the scenery guy. He knows a lot about the scenery, making changes to, like, say the ATIS frequency is wrong and prepared. You call him and he could change that for you pretty quickly. He's been here, I think, about 7 years. Good guy. We also have Duncan Palling. I think he's been here for about 6 or 7 years. Many of you have seen him at Oshkosh. He's usually the guy that we send out to Oshkosh to help during the PPC and during the entire week there at Oshkosh. A more recent hire is Tony Girolami. He started out assembling yokes, throttles, rudders out in the assembly team. And so he's kind of our go-to guy if there's a hardware issue. And then there's myself. So I've assembled a lot of the simulators here. So if there's a motion question or something about the simulator in general, I have a pretty good idea on how to fix that.
Okay, so you said something there when you're introducing John that brings up a question that people might have. So why does John, the scenery guy, need to get involved when we're changing an ATIS frequency?
Well, prepared, a lot of the stuff is inside of the scenery. So a lot of people, it's really confusing, but prepared has inside the scenery has ATIS frequencies, even has ILS frequencies. So it has obviously the scenery in scenery. So if there's an issue with the runway having the wrong number, that is a part of the flight sim engine that we use prepared. John has a certain editor where he can go in there and make changes to that. So he's going to make a lot of the changes for frequencies, ILS frequencies. And ironically, prepared did not add all the ILSs in the world. Sometimes it exists in the scenery, but they did not check the box for it to display in an approach. So sometimes we might get a call and someone says that ILS does not work. John can typically take a look at it, and sometimes it's just him checking a box, compiling a file, and then it will show up for the users. So when I say scenery, it's referring to a lot of the stuff inside of Prepared's scenery BGLs. So scenery, frequencies for different communications, even the ILS for ILS approaches.
Yeah, I think that's an important point that sometimes gets a little confusing, because when we talk about things internally with ourselves, we kind of know what that's a frequency, so that lives in the scenery folder, or there's lots of things like that that are based on internal knowledge that somebody who doesn't have that knowledge, when they call in, it may be a little confusing why you just need an ILS frequency changed, and somehow you're talking to some guy about scenery and getting new files. It sounds like it should just be like a navigational database update, but it's really not. And so, that's one of the things that we need to be a little bit cognizant of as we go through this. We have a question, but I'm actually hold off and get into that in a second. Hey, Jeff, how can, if let's say it's a simple problem, or they want to figure out an answer for themselves beforehand, or it's the weekend and they kind of need some help right now, are there any places that they can find information, like knowledge information?
Sure. So we have our website, redbirdflight.com. Under that website, there's going to be a support tab, and you can use that tab. There are some helpful tips in there. It's not going to include everything, but there's some general tips that might help you figure out your issue. A lot of times, simply rebooting your computer can fix a lot of issues. It basically stops all the programs that are currently running, starts them again. So a lot of times, if you can't reach us, I would try powering down your computer, powering it back up, and see if that resolves it. If that doesn't, you look at our website, support at redbirdflight.com, and look under the support tab, and you're going to find a link for different support items that could help resolve your issue.
Yeah, and so that support.redbirdflight.com, or through the support tab on the main website, that's got a lot of the technical support kind of stuff. If you're looking for more utilization, how do I use a sim in a flight program? What about certification, that kind of stuff? We also have a website called Redbird Landing, that has got a bunch of articles and blog posts and resources available to you that are focused more on that kind of like utilization stuff. And so that's landing.redbirdflight.com. We also, because we just love making websites, we just love it. We also have a resources page on our main website, redbirdflight.com, that's got ebooks, downloads. These webinars are also listed there, and there's a lot of tools that may be helpful for you there. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. I've got a couple questions from Rick here, not Rick in the office, different Rick, and I want to go through some of those. Okay, occasionally my FMX rudders don't work upon startup, no directional control on takeoff, shutting everything down and starting usually solves the problem. Is this common?
It can be common. A lot of our devices, our peripherals, our yokes, our throttles, our rudders, they're all the USB devices. A lot of those things are sensitive to temperature, moisture in the air. So yeah, it is a possibility that you're going to have a peripheral, a rudder, something not work, and rebooting can fix that. If you didn't want to reboot and you have access to the USB cable, you could also try ending the flight and unplugging it and plugging it back in. And usually that will resolve the issue as well. But yeah, we do have a whole lot of USBs in our systems, and from time to time you do see them drop out. The electronics inside the USBs, they're susceptible to changes in weather and moisture. So in addition to some of those items where you might have a dropout, I would also recommend maybe recalibrating your peripherals maybe quarterly when you have seasonal changes, and that will help keep your sim up to date and fly the way it should.
So if I wanted to know how to calibrate my controls, is there a place I could, is that on the support website?
Yeah, so that is going to be one of our topics inside the support tab on Redbird Flight.
Great. Okay, another question from same Rick. This actually looks like kind of a scenery question. He's flying an RNAV approach with the LPV, and the glide slope puts him about a mile short of the runway. That's, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's probably something that he should send an email to support@redbirdflight.com with the airport and the approach in question, and we can take a look at it and see if it's an easy fix. Correct?
Yes, that would be the correct answer. So send us all the information you have, the approach, all that information, and send it to us. What we're going to do is look at, what version of RealNav. So RealNav is our third-party nav data provider. If you're not on a current version, then that might have changed over the past. So it could be an issue inside of RealNav, or it could be a scenery issue where the runway has moved or needs to get moved. Again, going back to scenery, all the scenery comes from Prepared, the flight sim engine, and it's, I would say, 8 years old. So, as things change, those don't get updated by any software. We have to do that manually. So we don't know about those issues until they're reported to us. But the best way to handle that is either call in or send us an email with all those details.
Okay, great. Got a couple more questions and we'll run through these. Some of these I know the answer to, some of them I'll pass to you, Jeff. So how does the sim know the difference between the ILS localizer between an ILS and a localizer, I think is the question. When the ILS is the same frequency number for the same runway, but a different Morse code, do we get front course orientation all the time? So the ILS is set up in the scenery folder with a frequency to point a specific direction with an ident. If it, the general thing is it should function the same way as you're expecting it to function in the airplane. If it's not, that's a send it to support with all the information about the approach, the identifier, all that kind of stuff, and then we can look at it in the scenery file. Abdullah, wind direction is blown reverse side. What could be the reason? I'm not 100% sure about that question. Maybe you could retype that and send that question a little bit. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Miguel is asking about connecting online remotely to a simulator, and the answer is yes. Jeff, correct? We can get into sims that are connected online, right?
Yes. Having an internet connection is not necessary to operate your simulator, but it's going to allow for quite a few different things. Like if we need to diagnose your sim, most of our sims out there have remote software where we can log in. We do need a pretty good internet connection, otherwise it takes a lot of time, and we see a delay in frame rates, which makes it difficult to diagnose and fix. But having that internet connection is going to allow Redbird support to log in and fix and diagnose your issues, in addition to getting updates. So again, internet connection is not necessary to operate your simulator, but it's going to give you a better overall experience and will be much more efficient in trying to help diagnose and fix your issues.
Good. All right. So we got a question from Dave Cohen about biggest and most common issues people have when they assemble and start a TD for the first time. And I'm actually going to we'll get to that question in a second, Dave. I think we actually cover that on the next slide in a little bit of detail. So we'll hold that one. William Nelson has a question. Multiple times on startup, my control knobs won't connect to the GPS, won't allow me to change frequencies, ComNav, etc. So it sounds like the acrylic panel isn't connected or something. What's the deal with that, Jeff?
So yeah, I mean, if none of your buttons and knobs work on your acrylic panel, it's going to be an issue with the hardware, the acrylic panel itself, or possibly the, we call it the blind mate connector, and that's the port that receives the acrylic panel. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be that. There's also a chance that the software is just not working for some reason, but 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a hardware issue. We should be able to narrow that down if you had a different panel to see, you know, are you only having that issue with one specific panel, or is it across the board? And if it's across the board, it could be an issue with the blind mate cable.
Is there a chance that it might be a focus issue? I know we talk about focus issues later, but or is that a different thing?
It very well could be. So we have multiple monitors on a lot of our units, our TD Horizons, our FMXs. If you're using a keyboard, there is something called focus. And if the main screen, which is the one in front of the pilot, does not have focus, some of the buttons and knobs won't work. So one of the tips I think is good for all users. If you're using a keyboard and you start a flight, what you'd want to do is take your cursor and click on the main screen. And for your TD users, you want to click above, let's say the heading, the compass, and don't click on the instruments because that will basically wipe those out. But again, clicking on the main screen regains that focus. So that could be another issue. But we'd have to sit down and try to diagnose that with that customer.
Okay, so again, support.redbirdflight.com or give us a call during business hours and we can try to help with that. I'll take this one. How often does the simulator update? Well, the core software updates, I don't know, anywhere between once a month and once every 6 months, depending on how we're producing, like how the software is getting produced. I will say in recent years, we've tried to speed up the update cycle a little bit because we're producing more features. One of the things that Redbird Navigator gives us the ability to do is produce features more quickly. And so that's kind of as it comes up. We don't have a set release cycle right now. And then I got another question from Lonnie. Hi, Lonnie. Is there a place we can find what acrylics are available? Specifically looking for turbo 182 RG power capability with some new avionics. So the best place to find what acrylics are available is on the product page for the simulator you have, in your case an FMX, because some acrylics only work on some sims, just depending on hardware and all that kind of stuff. So if you go like simulators.redbirdflight.com/product/FMX, there'll be aircraft configurations, and then you can see all the available configurations. The other thing to do is just give us a call and we can kind of walk through what you're looking for and see if there's something we can do to fit that need. All right, electric trim on a Redbird SD doesn't appear to be working. Suggestions?
Yeah, call us here at Redbird or email us. What we're gonna do is we're gonna log into your system. We're gonna run a hardware test. So before we even start a flight, we're gonna run a hardware test to see if that button is sending the signal. If it's sending it there, then it's more likely to be an issue with the software, and we could take a look at that. But if it doesn't pass the hardware test and we have a button failure, maybe it's a wire that's come loose, something like that. But giving us a call and letting us log onto the sim, and I think we'll be able to diagnose that for you.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna actually, we still have a couple of questions. I'm gonna go ahead and move on to our next slide, go through those, and then we'll do another round of questions and answers. So let's talk a little bit about our installation and setup of the sims. So first off, let's start with what they should do like right now with COVID-19.
COVID-19. Okay, so we're getting this question a lot. What do we do in this pandemic? How do you keep everyone safe? I think it's a good idea. Obviously, everyone should wash their hands before they get in the sim. I had this idea that people could use, gloves, and maybe that's the safest way. But if they're not going to use gloves, you'd want to wipe everything down with the disinfectant. I would be very careful if you're trying to spray everything down to not spray the acrylic or anything on the switch panel that has buttons or knobs. You'd want to maybe spray the disinfectant on a cloth and then wipe everything down. And then when users are done, they should wash their hands again. Yeah, I know it's difficult times for everyone, and I think everyone should stay safe. Wearing gloves might be a little bit awkward, but I think that might be the safest thing. We are also, as Redbird as a company, are looking at ways to kind of do remote instructor, which might be coming soon. The other idea would be to have your instructor that might normally sit right next to the student to maybe sit outside the sim if you have one of the larger sims, to give instructions, so we're practicing that safe 6 feet distancing.
Okay, and there is an article on landing.redbirdflight.com about this, and we have like a list of things that you can do. Mostly Jeff's covered it, but just in case there's some more detail there. When you're set, let's go through desktop, like J velocities, set up on that. Are there any common things that come up during that?
Yes, so we're really just referring to desktops. All the large units, we send an installation manager setup. But as far as the desktops, the J velocities, the TDs, there's a handful of questions that always come up. And the biggest question is, what is the password to Navigator? It is in the manual somewhere, but that password, the default password, is going to be Redbird with a capital R 12345. And that password is going to allow you to change different settings in the sim management page, but we get that question a lot. Another great thing to know is all of our desktops get set up and tested, but they get tested independently of the rudder pedals. So if you're setting up a desktop, once everything's set up, you will have to calibrate your rudders for them to work properly. And again, if you're looking for help and we're not available, you could go to the website and there's a link that shows you how to calibrate your rudders. I think we talked about it quickly about focus. Folks of you with a TD and that have the Horizon 3 screen, after you start a flight, you're going to want to take your cursor and click on that main screen above the compass, and that's going to force the unit to have focus and make sure everything's working properly. I think those are going to be the few questions we get most often. We also get questions on the TDs. Does it matter where you plug in your USBs? And it doesn't. The same goes for the J and the velocities. If you have a USB, plug it into any open USB port. As far as the monitors, a lot of times you can plug them in any order, but we do have a specific way we prefer them to be plugged in. So we don't have to log in and try to make a configuration change. And I think that's going to be in our manual with the TD Horizon setup.
What about an internet connection? When do you need one on one of our sims?
So again, an internet connection is not necessary to operate the simulator, but it's going to allow for Redbird to log in and diagnose issues if you do have one. It also is going to allow updates. So if you're using the Navigator interface and you see a little icon that looks like an exclamation point, that means that there's an update available to you. Without an internet connection, you're not going to get that icon. So having your sim connected to the internet is going to allow you to get the downloads for updates. My recommendation on updating your sim is to wait until a Monday to do it. You don't want to try to update your sim on a Friday at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, as you know, our support team's leaving, because if there's an issue, it will be challenging to get any help until Monday. So if you do have an update, I would say do it Monday through Wednesday to make sure that you guys can use it before the weekend, and make sure those are successfully installed. The other question that was asked earlier is about updates. Many of our users use our third-party nav data from RealNav, and that is, they put an update out every quarter for the most part, and so you have to manually update that, and you would need an internet connection to get the most current nav data available for your sim.
Yep, and clearly you need it for tech support to get on onto the sim. And then in Navigator, we also have something called the Scenario Store, where you can download additional scenarios that you can fly, like the GIF missions or like the Pilot Proficiency Center missions that we've built. Those all require an internet connection. There was a question that I'm just going to go ahead and answer now about how to know when you have an update available if your sim isn't connected to the internet. So first, I'd say you probably should connect your sim to the internet once a month at least, and if you can, and check, do the refresh and see if there's an update available. Barring that, on our support website, support.redbirdflight.com, there is a changelog article for Navigator, and anytime we publish an update to Navigator specifically, we'll put the changelog up, so it'll say what's changed, you know, and all that. And so you could check the version that you have installed and make sure it matches the version that's on the changelog. And if it's behind, then you definitely have an update available.
Can I chime in? Also regarding updates, so the current units that we ship out today is going to be using operating system Windows 10. We have probably 50% of our customers still using Windows 7, which is no longer supported by Windows. The recommendation would be to update Windows 7 as much as possible through Windows updates, because eventually they're going to take those off the server. I just mentioned that because a lot of people, we've purposefully turned off Windows updates on their machines, but it'd be a good time if you're still using Windows 7 to update it completely, all the Windows updates, and consider looking at a computer upgrade with Windows 10 if you're having trouble.
Yeah, I'm go ahead and bump us to the next slide. So we're really talking about updates. There are a couple of questions that I want to cover briefly. Abdullah, about the wind question, honestly, I don't know. That's very odd. He has a PFD that shows wind blowing from west to east, but the effect on the airplane feels that the wind is blowing opposite from east to west. That's probably worth a phone call or an email to try to see if what's going on there. It's kind of a weird one. So Miguel is asking about stations like VOR, ILS can be reprogrammed. Yes, again, they can. If they change, the frequency changes, that kind of stuff, that's a thing that we can fix. And then Alexi, we got a quick reference guide for setting the weather. It gets a little confusing. It does get a little confusing. The advanced weather tab in Navigator is a personal pet peeve. I designed it, but it's still a personal pet peeve. And there is a newer Navigator user manual that we've built. It's on the support website. I wouldn't necessarily call it a quick reference guide, but it's got the most, it's the best thing we got right now for how to do that. And also about the Class B update for SFO, Alexi, again, that's a thing that you can send us an email to talk to John about. All right, we got another, I'm not even gonna try with your name, I'm sorry about it, but is there a possibility to know what features you are thinking to include in Navigator or in the future, or can we as users make suggestions for features? We don't have a published roadmap right now. I would like to, but we don't. Yes, you can suggest features. Probably, honestly, the best way to do it is either through, you can do it through support. You're also welcome to send me an email. I kind of help direct the design of that product a little bit. So my email is jharnagle@redbirdflight.com. J, first initial, last name @redbirdflight.com, and I can help with that. What's the best way to clean an acrylic panel? You said don't spray anything on it. What's the best way to clean it?
To me, the best way to clean it is to use just a microfiber cloth and wipe it down. A lot of people want to spend a lot of time cleaning it and not touch the panel when they're taking them off, and I'd say that's the wrong approach. I think you want to hold on to your panels to make sure you don't drop them. But if the fingerprints are bugging you, take a microfiber cloth and wipe it down. Be very careful on the back. There's a lot of circuit boards, and pulling a microcontroller off that would basically break the acrylic. I think we do have a little blurb out there about cleaning an acrylic. If you're going to use something like, I can't remember if we recommend Windex, but you don't want to put a lot on it. You'd want to wipe it, spray it onto a piece of cloth, wipe it down, and make sure there's no residual Windex on the panel itself. But I would only spray the front, or I'm sorry, I would only spray the cloth and wipe down the front. I would be very careful around the back of the acrylic panel in order to avoid damaging the circuit boards.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say don't spray it. Don't use Windex. use a microfiber cloth. And if like they make those little dust aerosol sprayer, like compressed air can things for cleaning computer. We have those for our marketing units that we use sometimes. If there's like, you get like dust inside, especially like on the knobs, the way that acrylic works is there's like a cutout, then the shaft of the pot comes out, and it doesn't all the way close that little round cutout. And sometimes you can get dust, especially if your sim happens to be outside at a trade show. And so we will sometimes use the little compressed air things to try to clean that up a little bit. But yeah, spraying stuff on them is probably a bad idea or even any kind of moisture on them is bad.
And a lot of times when you're looking at the acrylic, when there's no simulation going on, you notice the fingerprints. But usually when you turn on the avionics, the visuals are bright and you're not going to notice the little fingerprints.
Yeah. All right, so we got another couple of quick questions here. Our simulators have had many updates to radio aids and scenarios. We're concerned that a damage or update of Windows affects these new files. Is there a way that we can protect the files? So they've gotten some either custom scenarios or they've had nav data like scenery files updated. Is there a way to protect that?
The answer would probably be, I don't have a good answer. I mean, we don't save any of your saved missions. As far as the scenery goes, for the most part, our scenery guy, John, when he makes a change, he kind of puts it in his scenery folder. So if your hard drive went bad, he would be able to put that back onto your sim. As far as those saved scenarios, it's saved on the hard drive. So if your hard drive crashed, we would not be able to recover that.
What if they ran a backup? This is not something that we would do, right? Like Redbird support's not going to do, but if they ran like a commercially available backup onto a secondary hard drive, like a portable hard drive?
You certainly could do that. I would just suggest if something ever happened, you'd want to let Redbird know that, hey, our hard drive failed. This is what we're going to try to do to repair it. We're going to see some errors because when you take an image of your hard drive, it's going to put a timestamp on your hobs. And if you use your sim for a year and then put the imaged hard drive in your unit, the hobs are going to go backwards and it's going to throw an error to Redbird and we're going to say, what's going on? So if you're going to do something like that and make a backup just in case, that's fine. But if something happened, I'd want you to contact Redbird before you went ahead and tried to swap a hard drive or make a repair on your own so we could assist with that.
Okay. All right. So then the next question is about a yoke. Is there a way to replace the trim? I think it's the electric trim button, the actual button itself on a yoke.
There is a way to repair it. You'd have to take out the button, but there's going to be 4 or 5 wires that need to be soldered, and it's a pretty tricky job. If you put your soldering gun on it for too long, it's going to melt the button and ruin it. So if you're having trouble like that, unless you're a very skilled person with a soldering gun, which I'm not, I would talk to support and maybe send it in and have us repair it.
Great. All right, so we have a question about a couple more questions, and then we'll get into some of this other stuff. So we have Brendan is, I think, having problems with the Garmin 430 freezing when he's adding waypoints to the flight plan. Is there a way to fix this without restarting the flight, or is that a known problem? Is there an update or something that might help that?
So I think we'd have to take a look at your sim to see what version of software it is. This sounds like a different problem. If you're doing something on the 430, 530, and the 430 and 530 freeze up where you can still move the knobs, let's say on a heading bug or something like that, then it has to do with the software. So what we'd want to do is take a look at the system and see if your software needs to be updated and possibly go that route. The other thing we would want to do is get the details. A lot of people, when something happens with the sim, they say, well, can't you just look and figure out what's going on with the issue? We can look in the Windows logs and it says prepared stopped working. So a lot of times when someone reports an issue, we ask for all the details. Where were you flying? What was the approach you were using? What were you pushing prior to it freezing up? Because the prepared software just crashes, and that's the only information we get. So we do ask a lot of questions when something is not working properly, and ask you to kind of repeat that, you know, or try to replicate it again, because there could be a bug where it happens once in a while, or it could be specific to that approach. And that's why we're asking those questions. You know, what was the approach? What was the airport? What did you press? So if you're having an issue with putting waypoints, VORs in the 430, I would say give us a call. It could be a software update will fix it. It could be a scenery issue. Let's say the VOR doesn't exist. So we just need you to call and give us as much detail as possible, which led up to the crash.
Yeah, and then the second part of your question, Brennan, about the waypoint specifics and where they are, what they exist, et cetera. That's another scenery issue potentially. It may be an app data issue, but probably the best way to do that is to give us a call and we can take a look at it. All right, so last question and then we'll move on. We have a problem and it's an LD, and they've determined, Bill has determined that it's being caused by the avionics master circuit breaker, the little circuit breaker. And it probably sounds like the avionics or that circuit breaker is going off when it's not supposed to, based on the question. Is there a way to replace or repair a broken or loose wire that comes out of the back of the circuit breakers?
Yeah, so I mean, it's difficult to say what your problem is without seeing the details, but a simple thing would be if you really thought it was a circuit breaker, there's basically spade connectors on the back of the circuit breaker. So you could take the two spade connectors off of the avionics one and move it onto another circuit breaker and see if that resolved your issue. And if that did, then you would just need a new circuit breaker. I guess I would need a little bit more detail on the issue you're seeing to try to diagnose that. But
okay, great. All right, last point on around the updating. What about antivirus software? Does it come with it? Should we put it on there?
It does not come with it, and that is on purpose. So we do not recommend putting antivirus software on any of our units. It's basically going to drag the frame rates down. You're going to see notifications pop up, which is going to take away the focus of the sim, and things won't operate properly. So unfortunately, we recommend not putting antivirus software. Fortunately, we haven't had, to my knowledge, I don't recall anyone that's had a virus on their simulator. I've been in the support team for maybe 5 years, so maybe it happened prior to that. But we haven't had a lot of issues with the antivirus or viruses affecting people's simulators. But the answer to that question is no, do not put antivirus software on there. It's going to affect your simulator and it's going to be negative.
Yeah, and I would just add, it's probably a good idea if you can to have your sim connected to the internet frequently, but don't use it as an internet browser. You know, like if you use it for the internet, use it just to get updates and stuff from us. Don't go searching around on the website, on the internet with it. All right, so don't open your email, because that's where most of that stuff comes from. Let's talk a little bit about sim management. So what can we do in the sim management app in Navigator?
So most of you are using Navigator, the user interface by Redbird. You're going to see the Navigator springboard pop up, and you're going to see an icon for sim management. A lot of the questions, you know, what's the password? You're going to need that default password, Redbird12345, capital R, to get in there. But you can do a few different things inside there. So one question we get is, can you change the tail number of the aircraft? And you could actually do that inside of sim management. Another feature inside of sim management is turning off anonymous mode. So if a user wanted to sit down and use your sim, for the most part, if anonymous mode is turned on, then they can just start a flight. If you turn that off, they would have to go and create a key through Redbird Landing, in order to use your sim. So that might deter someone who's just trying to use your simulator without you knowing it. So again, that feature to turn anonymous mode on or off is in sim management. I think for the folks in Europe, we have to turn the metric system on. So that changes a few things where you're getting metric readings instead of the default there. I'm looking at my notes. What else do we have here? If you turn off your computer through Navigator, it's going to ask you for the password to restart or turn off. And you could turn that setting off where you don't need the password to turn it off through the Navigator interface. I encourage you to look at it and see, you know, sometimes the question you're asking can be resolved inside of sim management with a few of those settings.
Yeah, and can you change the password from that Redbird 12345 extremely generic password?
Yes, you can do that in sim management. Most people don't even know that you can do it, so most of the time we could log on and just use the default password to get in, but you can change the password inside of the sim management tab.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of settings, and that's actually where, when you talk about things that are happening on Navigator, a lot of that stuff is happening in that sort of background space. We've enabled things like sidekick uploads, where basically your flights, when you fly the sim, the start time, Hobbs time, track, all that stuff gets uploaded, can be uploaded if you opt into it, and then you can go to debrief.redbirdflight.com, because we love making websites, and see those flights, especially if you use a pilot key to identify yourself, and then you can actually connect it to ForeFlight, so that way when you fly a session in the sim, it'll automatically go into your ForeFlight logbook, and that's enabled by Sidekick uploads. You can we also have a CloudAhoy integration, I think, so you can push it into CloudAhoy automatically. There's a bunch of things that's in there. It's not, honestly, it's not, we haven't promoted it a lot yet, but that's where a lot of the work has been going on. And let's see, last but not least, what else? Oh, in sim management, that's where you can see your software versions. I think that gets lost sometimes, is that's where you can see what version of Navigator you have, that kind of thing. And actually, if you click on the software version, if it's some of them are linked, and you can actually tell, it'll take you to a change log, so it'll say what is enabled by that version. And I think you can also check to see your real nav update status and that kind of thing inside of sim management. All right, so it looks like we've answered all the questions. We have no more. If we do have more, please ask them. But let's go ahead and move on to flying missions. I think this is pretty straightforward. Is there anything you wanted to add on to flying missions? We can do save flights, free flights, gift flights. I just talked about debriefing a flight. Anything else?
I think some people don't know about free flight, especially on the big sim. So a lot of times when you go to dispatch, you're going to see the saved flights. If you don't want to use one of those saved flights, there's actually a tab at the bottom for a free flight, and you could select an airport, start in the air or on the ground. And I think that will help. A lot of people didn't know about that. They're using a saved flight, and then they're relocating once they start that flight. So look for that free flight tab to start wherever you want in the world.
All right, so now here's the real meat and potatoes. Known bugs and limitations. Let's start at the top. Prepared. What are our known bugs and limitations of prepared?
I honestly don't know of any bugs or any limitations, Josh.
Oh, perfect, ideal.
Any questions?
Yeah, so just to give a little context to back up, you probably know this, but for the vast majority of the sims that are out there now, we use a product called Lockheed Martin Prepared, and most of we're currently shipping version 3. There are some version 1s that are out there, but that's the simulation engine. It's a descendant of Microsoft Flight Sim, went through a couple iterations, and then Lockheed Martin bought the commercial rights to it, and we license it from Lockheed. There are newer versions of Prepared. I think we'll probably talk about it at some point, but a lot of what we do is we build software or have contractors build software that works with Prepared, like all the avionics, Navigator, all that kind of stuff. And prepared version 3 is a 32-bit system. Prepared version 4 and 5 are 64-bit systems. We are trying to make the transition because it's the future. We need to, but that's a lot of work. All that software's got to be rewritten to operate on a 64-bit architecture, and so that's why we're still shipping version 3. With that said, what about brakes in prepared?
Yeah, so a lot of times people want to, use a simulator just like they would a real plane. So they go and do a run up. There is a limitation in prepared. So if you go full throttle and hold your brakes, it's gonna creep and it's gonna eventually, your brakes will kind of give. That's been a known bug as far as I can remember. So, the kind of the workaround would be to hold your brakes and slowly do the run up. If you go full throttle, the brakes are gonna let go and you're gonna kind of jerk around and eventually gain some speed. So that is a bug. I don't know if it's a bug, it's a limitation inside of prepared, and we do not have a fix for that.
Yeah, and most run-ups shouldn't be full throttle. I've noticed, if you're doing on a 172, if you do a 1700 RPM run-up and you advance the throttle smoothly while holding the brakes, you should be fine. Where it gets a little tricky is sometimes you're not holding the airplane has got more forgiveness on the brakes usually. So you push the brakes in, you're not actually really pushing them all the way in. You're just pushing them in enough. With our sims, with prepared, you really have to make sure the brakes are fully engaged when you add the throttle, and you got to do it smoothly.
Also, another bug or limitation inside of prepared is when you're doing the run up and you're checking your mags. A lot of people say that doesn't work. Well, if you have a glass panel, you're actually going to see the RPMs drop like 25, and I know you're wanting to see more. So it does work, but in a steam panel, you're gonna barely see that needle move. And so from a user's perspective, you're gonna think it's not working, but it is dropping the RPMs by maybe 20. So that's another limitation inside of prepared that we do not have any fix for.
Yeah, I think it's probably not even a limitation. It's probably just the nature of the simulation engine. When you start a flight in prepared, you are using a brand new airplane. Like that engine is pristine, perfectly clean. We actually turn off, there's like a accumulated damage setting is what it's called, but where the performance and the aircraft handling degrades over time and it saves between flights. That's a setting inside prepared. We don't do that. So when you start with a pristine, perfect airplane. There's no carbon buildup on the plugs. It is perfect. So, you have a pristine engine, it really only drop 20-25 RPM on a mag check. When you have 1,000 hours on an engine and someone's been running it a little rich for the last 15 hours, that's when you're going to see the bigger drops. So you kind of have to keep that in mind a little bit. Is that it is not a well broken in airplane. Honestly, it's kind of a brand new airplane. Let's talk quickly about the ATIS and the wind direction. So the ATIS is reporting wind direction. Is it accurate?
It is accurate if you are, I guess, on the equator. So I guess prepared has different settings, and we're using a global setting. So when it reports back ATIS, it is actually dependent upon your magnetic variance. So if you look at like San Francisco, I think the magnetic variance is roughly 14 degrees. So the challenge is, you put in the wind direction and the ATIS is gonna report something back that's off by 14 degrees. And again, that's because we're using a global setting. I think that question also comes up a lot when you're setting cloud layers. People will say, well, why can't we use AGL? Well, the question is, what ground are you referring to? Are you referring to the ground that you're flying over right now, or the ground that you're gonna be, the elevation of the airport that you're gonna land at? So we're using a global setting. That's why it's in MSL, because that's an easier thing to base the cloud layers over. But so the answer to that question is it's accurate, I guess, at the equator. The further you deviate from the equator, the more it's gonna be off, and you'd unfortunately have to make some sort of calculation based off of your magnetic variance on the airport you're using to determine the correct wind direction.
Yeah, and so really that the kind of the, from an instructor's perspective, the way to handle it is you probably have, you know what your magnetic variation is if you're flying out of an airport frequently. And so if you want the wind coming, let's say it's 6 degrees, you know, you do plus 6 degrees. So if you want the wind coming out of 320, put in 326, or maybe the opposite of that, and 314, and then it will be 320 at the airport that you're at. I will say that having local weather versus global weather is on the list of things that we would like to accomplish, because it gives us a lot of flexibility with some of the other things we're working on. So I know that is on the feature list for versions of Navigator in the future. A couple of quick questions before we move on. Hugo, I'll take this one about Microsoft Simulator. So Microsoft's coming out with a new simulator product, looks really cool. We have no plans to upgrade. They have not talked about a commercial version of that product, and we need a commercial license to be able to sell it to you. And all of our stuff's built on Lockheed right now, so we don't have any plans to update to the new version of Microsoft. And yeah,
I think
you don't have to raise your hand, Jeff. You can just talk.
Oh, sorry. I was looking in the classroom. I'm the only one here. I think the other problem with Microsoft, the new version of Microsoft, a lot of it is cloud-based. And so a lot of our customers, again, you don't need the internet to use your sim, but I think if you're using that version of software, you would need the internet, because there's tons of gigs that you're streaming for the scenery.
Yep. All the scenery is streamed. Is there any way to connect to the Garmin in the sim to the instructor station (parentheses Insight)? So I think what you're talking about is displaying the Garmin on Insight, and kind of, can you do that?
So the answer is, so if you have Insight, which is one of our products that's kind of showing an external view of the airplane, it's running a different sim engine. So you might be able to, we could probably log in and make it pop up a G1000, the PFD, MFD, but it's gonna be a little bit different because it's a different flight sim engine. Inside of our simulators, we're using a third-party avionics, so it's gonna be different than the innate G1000 that's gonna be on Insight.
Yeah, so you can, short answer is yes, sort of. You can pull in under views, you can pull up panel, like there are panel views, and so that's running a copy of ESP, I think, but you can pull up a panel view and have multiple views displayed on the screen with Insight. That's when we had our Skyport flight school, that's how we had it set up. So we had external view, the panel view, and then the little camera. All right, so when you're running GIFT on a J or a J velocity, talk to me about selecting aircraft.
So yeah, we have a bug inside of the GIFT for J's and J velocities. When you're using GIFT, you're gonna see a drop down that's gonna have a default of, I believe, the 172 steam. And you have the choice of 172 steam or glass. Unfortunately, you're gonna have to click on the drop down and select the aircraft. If you don't make any changes, you're gonna get an error. And hopefully we'll have that fixed in a release of Navigator or an update. But yeah, the bug exists where you're using a J velocity and you leave the default aircraft for that GIFT scenario, it's gonna throw an error.
All right, so we're running up against our time a little bit, so I'm gonna go through this next point real quick. We talked about it already, but focus, losing focus on a TD or a sim with multiple screens. Basically, the answer is, if it doesn't look like anything's working, you push the pause button, nothing seems to be happening. First thing to try is plug the keyboard in, click on the main screen in front of the pilot, and then try it, see if that works.
We also have something in the registry that helps with focus, but if Windows 10, it's very difficult to stop them from updating. So every once in a while, you might have an update and you would notice that problem existing. So we could go in the registry and try to force the focus, but yeah, the simple workaround would be click on the main screen.
Yeah. Okay, I think we got a last slide here. Real quick, proper shutdown. How do we turn a computer off?
So the recommended way to shut off the computer would be to use the Navigator interface to shut down the computer, or use Windows, the software, by hitting your Windows key and clicking power off. The option to shut off your computer through the power button does work, but a lot of times people are doing hard shutdowns or a hard reset. So that has the potential of corrupting Windows. So the recommendation would be doing it through software, through the Navigator interface, or through the Windows software.
Right. What you really don't want to do is hold the power button, the external power button, for any period of time, because that's when you start getting into that hard shutdown sequence.
A lot of our
power.
big sims, all of our big sims are on a surge protector. You really don't want to just click the power button on the surge protector to turn everything off.
Yes, very much so. Okay, that officially wraps it up. It doesn't look like we have any more questions right now. So thank you, Jeff. I think, okay, we got one question. Hey, Richard, talking about the K35, that's actually, honestly, probably the best way to do that is to just give us a call and we can go through any limitations or known bugs on that. I don't have them offhand and we're kind of running out of time here. So Richard, I apologize for that, but if you could just give us a call and we can take that offline. So again, if you have a problem, support@redbirdflight.com or call the office at 512-301-0718. If you have any general questions or you want to buy some stuff from us, which we greatly appreciate, keeps us all employed, info@redbirdflight.com and the same phone number. Appreciate your time today. Thank you, Jeff. And again, this will be recorded and available for rewatching here shortly.